Welcome back. Meanwhile, over in Kramatorsk, Mayor Alexander Honcharenko said on social media that a military strike hit a residential district of Kramatorsk earlier today, but no civilian casualties were reported. The Ukrainian police said that Russian strikes hit a total of 13 areas in the Donetsk region from Monday, August 15th to Tuesday. Many residents have left Kramatorsk as Russian forces advance. The city is one of the last Ukrainian strongholds in eastern Ukraine, and its fall would take Russia a step closer to establishing control over the entire Donbas area. Ukraine aims to evacuate two-thirds of residents from areas it controls in the eastern battleground region of Donetsk before winter. Authorities describe the evacuation as mandatory, but residents can opt out by filling in a form declaring their intention to stay. Over to Zaporizhzhia, where Ukrainian and Russian installed officials have in the last 48 hours reported shelling near Europe's largest nuclear power plant, with both sides blaming each other days after the World Nuclear Watchdog warned of disaster if the fighting does not stop. Russia and Ukraine have traded accusations this month regarding the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant in southern Ukraine, which dominates the south bank of a vast reservoir on the Dnipro River. Nuclear experts fear fighting might damage the plant's spent fuel pools or the cooling system for the reactors. Russian radiochemist and senior nuclear expert Boris Zhukov from the Institute for Nuclear Research at the Russian Academy of Sciences says that shelling near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear complex could damage the cooling system for its reactors. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, which is seeking access to the plant, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for the establishment of a demilitarized zone around Zaporizhzhia. The United Nations says it has the logistics and security capacity to support an IAEA visit if both Russia and Ukraine agree. Russia took over the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station in March, soon after sending tens of thousands of troops into Ukraine in what Moscow calls a special military operation. In the meantime, the position of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is that the world will lose to terrorism and give in to nuclear blackmail if it takes no action to prevent an accident at the Russian-held Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station. He was speaking during his nightly video message.
Russia does not stop its blackmail actions at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and around it. Provocative shelling of the nuclear power plant territory continues. Under cover of the station, the occupiers are shelling nearby towns and communities. The Russian military hides ammunition and equipment right in this station's facilities. The station is de facto mined. All this clearly shows that Russia is rejecting the security demands of the European Union countries and 15 other countries, 42 in total, that called on Russia to withdraw its troops from the station. In particular, these are Turkey, Georgia, Great Britain, Korea, Japan, Australia, Canada, and the United States of America. If a terrorist state allows itself to completely ignore the international community's demand, and furthermore, on such a sensitive topic, this clearly indicates the need for immediate action. Any radiation incident at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant can be a blow to the countries of the European Union, Turkey, Georgia, and the countries from more distant regions. Everything depends only on the direction and strength of the wind. If Russia's actions lead to a catastrophe, the consequences may hit those who yet remain silent.
Neighboring Estonia says it will prevent most Russians from entering the country with visas issued by Estonian authorities from Thursday this week, cutting off a popular route into Europe's passport-free Schengen zone. Foreign Minister Urmas Reinsalu said that all the valid Schengen visas, which except for some humanitarian and family-related cases, will be sanctioned. Russian tourists crossing the border in the eastern city of Narva say that Russian citizens should not be made responsible for their government's actions. The EU last month agreed the 7th round of sanctions against Russia since its invasion of Ukraine. Latvia, Lithuania and Czech Republic have already stopped issuing visas to most Russians, while Finland and Estonia recently called for the EU to do so jointly.
We will sanction all the Schengen visas which are valid currently, except some humanitarian and family-related cases. And it means that we are speaking around 50,000 plus valid visas, and vast majority of them from the 18th of August will be blocked. Persons using these visas will be blocked to enter Estonia. And secondly, what we are considering is indeed also opportunities or momentums to close the Russian-Estonian border at all to Russian citizens entering Schengen area or Estonian territory. When these people are going to see Brandenburg Gates, the people are dying under the Russian Federation bombs, and Russian Federation authorities are using the tax money what is paid by these people who are making their tourist trips to Europe. So letting people into one country or Europe is not a human right. And secondly, we have to admit that also Russian society, by and large, also bears a passive moral responsibility for these atrocities which take place in Ukrainian soil. The legal responsibility is on Putin, his inner circle, and these executioners of genocide. But of course, the moral responsibility lies also on this state and its citizens.
Meanwhile, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz says while there was room for a European-level debate on banning Russian tourists, it was important not to make life harder for Kremlin opponents to flee Russia. The Prime Ministers of Finland and Denmark say that a visa ban should be discussed.
Well, welcome to this.
It was an important decision of all of us that we imposed sanctions on those who are responsible for the war and a lot of oligarchs and those who are financially and economically profiting from this Putin regime. And we will continue to do so. But I think this is not the war of the Russian people, it is Putin's war, and we have to be very clear on that topic. I think there is room for maneuver in different countries, yes, if this is the question, as it is always the case. And it's also as acceptable that we start a debate on the European level on what to do. What is important for us is that we also understand that there are a lot of people fleeing from Russia because they are disagreeing with the Russian regime. And they've fled to many countries in Europe. They fled to many countries all around Russia. And all the decisions we take should not make it more complicated for them to go for freedom and to leave the country for getting away from the leadership and the dictatorship in Russia.
Ordinary Russian people didn't start the war, but at the same time we have to realize that they are supporting the war. I think it's not right that Russian citizens can travel, enter Europe, Schengen area, be tourists, see the sightseeings while Russia is killing people in Ukraine. It's wrong. And we need to discuss it in European Council. We need to discuss it in the Schengen area, what to do with the issue. Of course, it's not black and white issue. There is also different colors of gray in there. There are also many people in Russia that are against the war, that are actually under threat within Russia. So, of course, there are different colors also the situation. But I think, in general, I understand very good about the frustration.
It's understandable why some Europeans and maybe especially some Ukrainians find it a bit strange that Russia has attacked a European country. There's a war in Europe, and at the same time we are receiving tourists from the same country that has attacked another country. So I think it is an important discussion.
To all the stories, a Russian-backed separatist court in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk has charged 5 foreign nationals captured fighting with Ukrainian forces with being mercenaries, saying 3 could face the death penalty. According to Russian state-owned news agency, the foreign nationals who were captured in and around the port city of Mariupol face a possible death sentence under the laws of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic. It cited the judge as saying that the trial would resume early October.
I was detained in Ukraine by the Russian Federation, nowhere near the DPR. In a vehicle together, which I was driving, we drove up to a Russian checkpoint where we were taken out of the vehicle. We had weapons pointed at our heads and we were detained by the Russian soldiers.
And what was said in that contract?
It stated that we were civilian workers who were working to evacuate civilians from Ukraine. It stated our names, our passport numbers, and what we were allowed to do and where we were cleared into.
And to the looming food crisis in Africa, the first United Nations ship carrying the first cargo of humanitarian food supply bound for Africa has left the Ukrainian port of Pevdini. Earlier, a joint coordination centre set up by Russia, Turkey, Ukraine and the United Nations said it had approved the ship's departure. The UN's World Food Programme, which bought more than half of its wheat from Ukraine before the war, says 345 million people in 82 countries are now facing acute food insecurity and need urgent humanitarian support. Turkey's defense ministry says a total of 5 ships left Ukrainian ports carrying corn and 23,000 tons of wheat intended for the drought-hit Horn of Africa, Ethiopia. Global food prices have been driven up and fears of shortages in Africa and the Middle East have been on the rise. And with Russia's invasion of Ukraine entering its 6th month, some fear the long-term result will be an environmental disaster that could last for years. Let's take a look.
These divers are demining experts searching a river in Ukraine. Ukrainian forces took back the Sumy region from Russian forces in April, but 4 months on, cannon shells are still being fished out in its waters. Ukraine's Environment Ministry estimates it will take at least a decade to clear all the mines and explosives from the country. And their fears long-term war could mean an environmental disaster, leaving Ukraine's waters contaminated for years to come.
It is known that water demining will go on for years. It is the area where we have a lot of work to do. We estimate the work that has to be done to demine Ukraine's waters will take at least 5 to 7 years. Why? Because it is the most difficult type of demining.
Ukraine's emergency service in June said more than 239 square miles of land littered with thousands of explosives had been cleared, but nearly 160,000 square miles are still seen as contaminated. Sofia Sadogurska at the Center for Environmental Initiatives also agrees that the consequences of the pollution could last for decades.
The consequences of such pollutions, we can say, for example, from experience from previous wars, could last for decades. And it means that these territories are heavily polluted, for example, with heavy metals, with other chemicals. It means that these areas will be impossible to live, for example, because there will be no fresh water. There will be always danger of poison. They will be very difficult to maintain, for example, agriculture.
She also warns that the efforts to remove the unexploded devices may not be enough to protect the ecosystem and human health.
These territories are affected not just by mining itself, but also by heavy pollution from explosions and from rockets and from the moving of the, for example, military troops. So just remove mines on these territories will not be enough to restore all this unique ecosystem.
An estimated 27% of Ukraine's land needs demining. As part of efforts to help, the US government approved $89 million in funding to help Ukraine equip and train 100 teams to clear landmines and unexploded ordnance for a year. The funding is the largest US demining program yet in Ukraine.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says that Moscow valued its ties with countries in Latin America, Asia and Africa and was ready to offer modern weapons to its allies. Putin used a speech at an arms show near Moscow to boast of Russia's advanced weapons capabilities and declare its willingness to share technology with like-minded countries. He was speaking nearly 6 months after Russia sent tens of thousands of troops into Ukraine, where Moscow has suffered setbacks and heavy losses.
Russia sincerely cherishes historically strong, friendly, truly trusting ties with the states of Latin America, Asia and Africa. It is ready to offer its allies and partners the most modern types of weapons, from small arms to armored vehicles and artillery, combat aviation and unmanned aerial vehicles. We intend to actively develop cooperative ties to create new models of weapons and equipment, to work together on fair and equal terms.
Well, back to the German Chancellor, who has said that he expects Turkey would quickly ratify Sweden's and Finland's accession to NATO. Mr. Scholz emphasized the accession of Sweden and Finland as gains for NATO. He also said that with Sweden and Finland, NATO gains two valued partners that will strengthen the defense capabilities of NATO and therewith enhance their security. He says they are needed as partners. Meanwhile, Andersson stressed that Sweden would abide by the agreement with Turkey, which led to Turkey dropping its veto on Finland's and Sweden's application to join the military alliance in June after weeks of tense negotiations. The government in Ankara had accused the two Nordic countries of, among other things, harboring fighters of the banned Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, and demanded the extradition of numerous people. All NATO countries must ratify the accession of Sweden and Finland.
We discussed how sharply the security situation highlights the urgency of accelerating the green transition. Reducing our dependency on fossil energy is the only way forward. We agreed on a memorandum of understanding between Sweden, Turkey and Finland, or Sweden, Finland and Turkey. And of course, from a Swedish government perspective, we will live according to the memorandum of understanding that we agreed upon. And the cases of extraditions that are being processed in Sweden will of course be processed according to Swedish and international law. That is also something that we agreed upon in this memorandum of understanding, and the case last week was according to Swedish and international law, and we will continue to work in that way.